This is the One and All podcast, a proud member of the Dunham Audio Network.
We will always be the same. Our beliefs will be unchanging and unwavering. We believe continually in one truth, but for all humanity. In one Savior, but for all people. One truth that will be delivered in love and compassion, connecting every one person to all that God has promised them.
Welcome to the One and All podcast. My name is Aaron.
And my name is Ben.
And today we have a fantastic conversation with the one, the only, Jeff Vines.
Yeah.
Lead pastor of One and All. We are in an interesting day and age currently dealing with this thing called the coronavirus. And we wanted to get Jeff on to just share his thoughts about it, kind of on the spiritual side as well as the physical side, some decisions that we've had to make as a church, and just kind of be transparent behind the scenes about what's going on.
Yeah. We hope and pray that this is encouraging to you in this time. By the time you're hearing it, it's probably a couple of months into it. A little bit past,
yeah.
By the time you hear this, may or may not be past us. But regardless, these encouraging words, I think, are appropriate for any season. So here's Jeff.
That is fresh, and that's for you. That is an oat milk flat white from Cactus Coffee. How do you feel about Cactus?
Where's Cactus Coffee?
Laverne,
I'll tell you one thing, that's
right?
good oat milk.
Okay, there you go.
But are you okay with getting coffee from a place, public place?
Well, I mean, here we go, right? Now we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Are you?
But if you go to the hospital, I'm not in it with you together.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't been out to a place.
Yeah.
My wife has, brought some stuff back a couple of times.
I haven't been to Clatch.
Yeah.
I'm just decided.
Oh, really?
No. They closed to indoor seating, so you could come and order a coffee, but you had to take it away. You couldn't stay.
Oh, and you like the idea of being there.
Well, no, but I just think, man, if, I don't know who works there. I don't know what they've touched, what they've handled, what they've been around. So I'm just taking precautions. I guess it's better safe than sorry, and I do want to be a good citizen.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with my brother yesterday, and we were talking about, a myriad of different things, but essentially the reaction and what causes the reaction. Like, you've seen those movies where you have the people, right? It's a crisis movie, or it's a like some sort of disaster movie. And you have that group of
9 out of 10 movies.
Yeah,
movies.
You have that group of people that are just going crazy, and when you watch the movie, you go, "Man, why? Who would do that? Why are you doing that?" And then now we're kind of seeing something to a much less
to
degree.
be fair, though, I think
are,
people are still asking that question, though. Like, they're looking at the videos of people in Costco just rating it, asking, "Why are you doing that?"
Maybe there's a good reason or something happening. I don't.
It's a different culture,
understand.
though, guys. I mean, I'm the older guy in the room. It's a different place now. I can tell you. And I started noticing it when I came back from my first trip from Zimbabwe. And then my second trip, I started noticing a change. And we don't like to admit it, but it is a different world now. We are very much entitled, and we are very much me.
When was that crux?
What's good for me.
When did you notice that? What year?
I think I noticed the change in 1992 was the first change.
Well, I was born in 91, so there might have been something to do with that.
Well, then you came into the world. The first change was one.
That was 90s.
We used to be incredibly service-oriented. I mean, man, you go into a restaurant, go to whatever you went into, man, people just came out, smiled, welcomed you, and said, "Man, we're so glad you're here." And when I came back in 91, I realized that had gone. That it was like, okay, we're doing you a favor by letting you shop here. We're doing you a favor by letting you drink our coffee. It was totally different now because the economy was so strong, so good. Everybody had money. And we didn't, if you don't come into the coffee shops, other people will, so it doesn't really matter. Right. That changed. Then in 96 was the second change. And that was more of a an affluent change of where the sacred was kind of pushed aside. And there was a lot of fighting about what could be shown on TV and what could be shown on cable and what should be shown at what time of night, and that happened. You would have been very young,
Right.
but those who are 50 years and older would have remembered that. And then in the 2000s is when we really got, it's just natural. When you have it so good like we do in the West and have it for so long, we become a me society. And I think what you're seeing is people, they don't trust the government. They don't trust the news they're hearing. So I'm going to take care of me, myself, and I'm going to get everything I can, hoard
That's
it.
interesting.
Although I was glad to see the news story in the South. We're still a hospitable people. So people go into the Walmart, stacking up. But I read the news of where a lady came in to get something and there was nothing left of whatever she was wanting. I wish I could remember what it was. It might have been milk or bread or something. And she got into the checkout lane and the lady in front of her had like a cart full of it. And she said, "Did you take all the bread or whatever it was?" She goes, "Yes, but here, if you need some, just take half mine." So it's still
there a little bit.
It's still out there.
Yeah.
Man.
I think I've seen that around, and even just heard stories from friends and stuff about encountering people that it may look a certain way on the outside, but if approached, there's a genuine desire to help others.
Yeah.
And even though the cart might be stocked, we have people that like to be prepared.
Man, I hope you're right.
That's fine. But it's like that. Yeah, sure. I don't think I've seen one. I mean, I have seen a video clip surface. It was actually from Australia, where some people were fighting over toilet paper.
And I was going to take the conversation somewhere else, but we'll stop there for a second because we were talking to all of our good friend Steve Maharg, who's not yet been on the podcast, but he was saying that it's surprising to him, and he's noticed the global culture, because he's like, I would have never guessed that Australians would have reacted this way. He's like, that's not the Australia that I lived in. And I think Steve's lived here for close to 5 years now, right, out of Australia. But do you have any comment? You've lived in a couple places, Jeff, around the world. Is it surprising to see the global mindset approaching a problem like this instead of isolated country mindsets?
When you talk about Australia, New Zealand, I lived down there for 10 years, and it's very different there. They tend to not panic as quickly as we do. And it is surprising that you would see them fighting over toilet paper. I don't get to think about I got to tell you, I just don't get to think about toilet paper. I still haven't. No one's given me an explanation for that.
Because out of all the things
you can do without,
you just have a shower, use an old shirt.
Exactly. You're not going to run out of water. I got old golf towels sitting around, man, like 100 of them. So if I'm going to want something, it's something like milk or bread or something. Toilet paper? Really? I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to see the world react that way. But you do see both sides. I mean, I've seen both sides of humanity kind of start to come out. And I'm really curious to dive into kind of the apologetic side of a crisis like this, particularly the coronavirus. I don't know if we've actually said what we're talking about. But you see both sides, and it seems like people move to one pole or the other, where you see some of the greatest humanitarian acts, some of which are happen to be coming out of this church, which is really exciting, and we'll dive into that. But then you also see some of the most selfish and people reverting to the really core of who we are as humans, a very self-focused, I'm going to get mine, I'm going to save myself kind of mentality. I'm curious, when things like this happen, Jeff, what kind of putting on the apologetics hat, or when you're talking to people, is there anything that's really surprising, or is it just, this is who we are as humans, and this is nothing new?
Yeah, I guess that's the good thing. We're consistent.
Yeah.
Because if you go all the way back to the First World War and the Second World War, I'm not saying I was around for them, but I grew up in a society that talked about them often. They were centralized topics in education when I was younger. And it happens every time. You have the wicked heart of humanity revealed, and you also have the cream rising to the top. And so you have incredible acts of sacrifice and servants and benevolence, while at the same time you have just hoarding and raiding and evil. I mean, it's empirically verifiable what Jesus said, that you have two kingdoms diametrically opposed to one another present on earth. That's right. And both kingdoms are a present reality, and you're going to see both sides. And the most difficult circumstances bring out both sides on steroids.
Yes.
So you get acts that you never thought you would see in your lifetime of good, but also of evil.
That's right.
And both will be prevalent.
Is there something particularly different about this event that is, maybe it's the global nature of it, social media in general, the news, the reliance on that, fake news, is there something particularly different about this event than others you've seen?
I got to tell you, no. People have asked me that.
Yeah.
Numerous times now. I just did a phone call down in Australia. They asked me one of a theological question, but it's the same theological question I was asked in 1993. Same exact question.
Wow.
And they're the questions of, how do we harmonize a pandemic and what's going on with our belief in a good and loving God? I've been asked that question since the 80s, even when I was younger, first opening up the door to apologetics. So same question, same reaction of people. Because we're more socially connected, we have the news of what's going on not only in our own backyard but in every backyard. I mean, we can make a chart and show you how many people have contracted the virus and how many have defeated it, how many are struggling with it, and how many have died because of it.
Sure.
That's the difference. More information, but the human response has not changed.
Yeah. That's something that I've noticed with this in just thinking about, my parents' lifetime, my lifetime. It really hasn't been anything too similar as far as scale. The only difference is present day, the accessibility of information, and the how that information is used elicits a response. And it can be, regardless of any leader's response to the issue in any country, right? This is worldwide. So everyone's made their local decisions based on, as quick as they could, as they were informed as well as they were, could have been. They're making these decisions and it's so easy to put a blame and go, oh, so-and-so did that, or it was because of this. And this was the conversation I was having with my brother that I brought up earlier about, maybe this is just my opinion, but I feel like it's how you read the information. Like what's on your headlines, is it clickbait, right? There could be some truth in there, but it's the abuse of the truth, or just the framing of the truth that causes a certain response.
Yes.
So let's get down to the truth. The truth is, it's a virus, fairly unknown, that has taken some lives.
Yep.
Some are more susceptible than others. Right? These are all true things.
Yes.
People are dying from this.
Yes.
How would you? I don't know. It's just a curious question, but how do you frame that in a way that's helpful?
Yes.
And not just, 2,000 people are dead, lock yourself away. That's where my mind was going in my discussion with my brother of I feel like the ones who have the most say, perhaps right now, is the media in affecting change. You can govern. You can set guidelines. You can set even just strong suggestions. You can, execute these national orders. But at the end of the day, people, it's our response. It matters what the greater number of people do.
Yes, that's right. And so being an organization, One and All, there's at least a couple thousand people that listen to what we have to say, and we make decisions that impact their at least weekly lives. How, as the leader of that organization, what's kind of the thought process? How do you even go about making a statement on it, making decisions like, do we have church? Do we listen to what the city's regulations are? I mean, how to kind of maybe walk us through a little bit of that?
It's in times like these that any leader of any organization needs to be as informed as possible. You can't know everything, but you have to be as informed as possible. So I'll look at various sources. And I always have my go-tos, people that I trust to release the news on the basis of how they've responded in the past. I will trust them in the present.
Yes.
And so on the basis of that decision or the information that I have, then I will make a decision that is best for our people and best for our testimony and witness to the community.
That's right.
And that's why I go back to when I made the decision that we're not going to have services, it wasn't because of some governmental ordinance or order. It was more because the Center for Disease Control said, basically, we can knock this thing out in the next 14 days if we will isolate ourselves and not come together in big groups. Well, I care about not only people in our church, but people in the community. I thought, well, I don't want to be the church that says, no, we're going to disobey that and then be the one responsible for spreading the coronavirus and people dying in our valley because some stubborn leader who thought he was pious and righteous than everybody else.
That's right.
So I said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to follow the rules here of the Center of Disease Control and err on the side of caution. And I think right now we're doing the right thing, and it's not. It's the reason we're not where we could be had we not done this. But I think there's still some time to go, but I think we'll see an end to this. I do.
Yeah, that's good. And to the response of, and maybe take it theologically or into the apologetics, but to somebody who would say, well, we as Christians or Christ followers would maybe be a more accurate way of saying that we live with no fear. We don't fear disease. We don't fear, and we don't take. And you just addressed that we don't take orders from the government just in isolation with that. But what would you say to somebody who's kind of taking that approach? Well, we're a church. We believe in Jesus. We believe that we don't have to fear.
Well, it's like I said, the passage that I've quoted often, ours is not the spirit of timidity and fear, but of what? Power, love, and a sound mind.
Yes.
We forget the sound mind thing. That's Paul's way of telling Timothy, don't be stupid. Trust God, but don't tempt him. I could say, well, I'm gonna go out and run in the middle of the street because I'm living no fear and I can cross this traffic, no problem. You're gonna be hit by a car, So you use your head, you use a sound mind, but you don't live in constant fear. I think what Paul instructs us in the New Testament to do is to continue the work of the gospel. That's the context we don't have spirit of timidity and fear. We forget that most of the gospel is written in the context of a persecuted church.
Right.
So we continue to preach the good news of the gospel. We continue to do the good things without fear and timidity because ultimately we know God's in control.
Yes.
And so this is where it gets really interesting because I was just reviewing some things before I came over. And I recalled that quote again from the early church in the letter to Dionysius where they were describing basically the compelling nature of the first Christians in the Greco-Roman world. And if you read that little paragraph that has been quoted so many times, you see Christ followers who, when everyone else in the Greco-Roman world were abandoning those with leprosy or disease or with some kind of physical challenge, the Christians were out on the streets nursing them, helping them, giving them food and clothing. I thought, okay, how does that apply to the coronavirus?
Yes.
What should we be doing? And I think that what we should be doing is isolation. However, everybody can be a good neighbor. You can, if there's a need in your community and on your street, you meet that need. If something comes to your attention that somebody needs food, so an elderly person needs clothing, they need medical, you meet that need.
Yes.
And so I was talking to Elaine Lucas this morning, one of our elders' wives, one wife per elder,
nice.
And she mentioned how she goes to the grocery store or wherever. And when she does, she keeps her distance, but she smiles and she encourages people.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think that we can restore some of the respect for the church in this time when we don't run and hide away. We isolate, but at the same time we're reaching out within respectful distances.
Yeah, being good neighbors, exactly what you're talking about, and you don't have to gather in droves on a weekend to spread the gospel.
It's very interesting, guys. I'd like your take on this too, but I was thinking earlier about this whole thing and how the bottom line is when something like this happens, pandemic, people are worried. Come on, let's be honest. They're worried and people are dying. It's not massive in the U.S. I think 98 deaths and 45 were in Washington State, one place.
Yeah.
So it's not a high number of deaths, but a lot of people are getting it, and evidently it's
relatively unknown. That adds to the fear.
It's relatively unknown. You don't know what's going to happen from here. But every time we come to this, there are three primary statements given by Christians, okay? Christians.
This
Number
is
one.
good.
Number one, some will say, well, this is obviously God punishing us for the evil in this world. We are an evil nation. We have turned our back against God, so God's going to get us.
I've seen some of that
Yeah,
scripture
the problem
quoted.
with that is, if God's going to punish every evil, why are we even still here?
That's right.
For you to think you know what act is an act of God and which one isn't, it's just that requires infinite knowledge, which you don't have.
That's right.
Second, you'll have a group of people say, well, there is no God. This proves it. Well, that's self-destruct. So I'm not going to go into that. We've done that before because we ask questions of illness in decidedly moral categories. So we're assuming that life is sacred and life can't be sacred without God. So you have to resolve.
Yes.
You may not solve the problem of a pandemic, but you have to resolve it in the context of God. That's a philosophical discussion for another time. It's the third category. It's the third category people say, well, God sent this to us. Or they will say, no, they will say categorically, they'll say God did not, that's the first group, God did not send this to us, but he is capable of taking a disadvantage, turning it into an advantage and using it for the glory of God.
Sure.
That's half right. Half right in the sense that God is able to take whatever happens and use it for his advantage. But you still go too far when you say God sent it. Because you simply don't know.
That's right.
That is the point. No one has infinite knowledge. You don't know what God sends, what God allows, what is the natural ebb and flow of a cause and effect universe.
Yes.
You know, if I'm a corporation and I dump toxic waste in the river behind me and the whole community gets sick, did God send that, or is that cause and effect in a cause and effect universe?
Yeah, right.
It's cause and effect. So we don't know how the sickness got started. We don't. Now, here's what's interesting in the Bible. Do you know what we're told? And we forget this. Paul tells, or not necessarily the Apostle Paul, although he does it in other places, the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 12 says, look at hardship, any hardship at all, and it's the very exhaustive word, as discipline. Now, he does not say it's discipline. He's saying that he doesn't know. He said, but if you're going to really weather a storm as a Christian, you should look at all hardship as discipline. That should be your perspective. Why? Because if you look at it as discipline, you'll turn inwardly and stop blaming everything outwardly, and you'll say, okay, what is it in me that needs to change? Now, this is where, as you look at this pandemic, and you think about it from three different quick perspectives, and then I want to get the millennial view and the premillennial and the non-millennial.
There you go, yeah.
Because we're told that the millennials are the key to solving this crisis. Have you seen that?
Yes.
That we're the key.
I have not actually seen that. I'd be curious to hear about
They
that.
have told us that the millennials who love to meet together and commune together, and they're not going to stop. And
The doctor said, I forget her name, but she's like the greatest, we call it the greatest generation.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was just a tip of the hat in the moment to encourage us to listen. But
That's funny. Interesting.
No, yeah. She was,
So they're concerned that
yesterday
we
was-
are not going to stop meeting, ironically,
Well,
what
no.
we're doing right now.
well, there's three of us.
There you go, yeah. That's true.
No, just the large gatherings going out. The majority of that age
Movies,
group
food.
I
is
understand.
the millennial age
Gotcha.
group.
Okay, so the key will be to dissuade them from doing that. But finish your thought.
Okay, I was thinking about this, and I thought, wow, okay, just from somebody who's been around for 55 years, whatever, here's what I've seen. There's three Advents that have happened in my time, and I realized how this pandemic will answer or address all three of them. And there's three major ones. The first is that with the advent of our government taking on the role of social provider. This happened somewhere after 9/11. It was happening before then, but it happened to a greater degree even after, because what happened is after 9/11, it was assumed that the church and the government needed to separate even farther apart. So you had all these faith-based organizations who were instrumental in benevolence in local communities. The government depended on them to meet the needs of the less fortunate in most of the community because the government could not take that upon themselves. After 9/11, the government was wary of having any kind of relationship with any religious organization. They
Interesting.
were trying to separate.
Right.
What happened is they took back the power of the local church to be involved in faith-based things because they didn't want the church to have a say in how those things operated. Pregnancy clinics, but not only that,
Sure.
just poverty,
Yeah.
education, all those things. They didn't want Christians educating people for fear they might educate them about God and Christianity.
Right.
So the government takes that back. And the tax burden is so heavy. But what happens is the government didn't get back involved, that it just got neglected. So you had communities seeing the church now as irrelevant.
Yes.
Because they used to see the church as the social provider, and now the church wasn't doing that. They blame the church. Well, if the church isn't doing that, what good is the church at all?
Yes.
So that's the first thing. Second thing was that with the advent of social media, we thought we were bringing the world closer together, when in actuality, to some degree, we were bringing it farther apart. And I use the example of when I went to APU to meet some of the students. So I sat down with President Wallace and we were having a meal, and there must have been 30 students around the table. The purpose of me being there was to meet the students, but I never got to have one word with them. Do you know why?
Why?
They were all posting that they were meeting with me on Facebook.
That's funny.
They were all posting they were with me, but I had no conversation with any of them.
Fascinating.
So they were typing, I'm with Pastor Jeff, but you're not really with me.
Right.
So social media has brought us together, but in a way, you have families at night now where there used to be meaningful conversation.
Sure.
Everybody's on their cell phone, posting their Facebook, looking at movies, latest information. So with the advent of social media, we've been isolated more than we've come together, more than we know.
Yes.
And then the final thing is churches in that same span of time became less benevolent oriented because the government was taking that role over now. And so they became places of what we call spiritual buzz. In other words, they became, instead of really asking the question of how can we invest in the community and help the less fortunate, let's build these huge edifices. And we started saying, let's have people come to us, but the call has always been that we're supposed to go to the community.
Yes.
So things got skewed. Now I started thinking, this pandemic right now, nobody likes it. I don't like it, and I don't want it, and I don't know if God sent it or allowed it or if it's cause and effect. I'm not smart enough. No one is. But I can tell you this. Think about the three things that will happen as a result of it. Number one, we will realize we don't really have community in isolation on Facebook.
Right.
If we have to be isolated for 8 months and all we have is social media, we'll go crazy because we'll realize it's not real community. And we will thirst for real community, accountability, relationship, fellowship, and hands-on. Second, the church during this time, it's going to have to realize that, your real role isn't a big building because you may get to a time where nobody shows up.
Right.
Your real role is to meet the needs in the community of those who are less fortunate.
That's
and if
real
you're not
good.
doing that, you're irrelevant.
Yes.
And then the third thing, the government's going to realize, man, we can't really survive without the church. We really need a partnership with the church because we're going to depend on them to be hospitals, to be places of isolation. So all those things that have happened, and I just wonder if God, and I'm not God, so I want to be careful here, but I just wonder if God says, okay, you guys don't know what community is really like, I'm going to have to force you into isolation.
That's really interesting.
You church, you've forgotten what your purpose in life is, I'm going to have to force you into isolation and remember what your primary goal is. It's not huge buildings. Not that I'm anti-huge building. That's not the point.
Right.
Because a lot of guys have huge buildings and are benevolent.
That's right.
So that's not the point.
Yes.
And then the third thing is, I think God says, all right, you think you can do without my people? Then you're going to have such a burden on you and you're not going to be able to do it without the church.
Yes.
Now, that's interesting. Just those three. And if I as idiotic as I am, if I can come up with those three examples, how much more wise than the heart of God to be able to say, I will take this and I will achieve my purposes in the midst of it.
Amen. Yeah, that's really well thought out. Ben, do you have thoughts on the
the church,
the millennial take?
Yeah, the dynamic of the church and its involvement in the community and its worth really sticks out in times like this.
Yes.
And I think it's really important for the church to understand that, to realize that, and to go, okay, what can I do? It's like you said, it's helping your neighbor, it's stepping in it, but also putting together programs like yesterday here, One and All, people getting together, setting up teams to go on grocery runs for people.
That's what we call the Compassion Network. That's what we call it here, but
for elderly people who feel unsafe to go out. It's stuff like that I think, one, I think gets people through in view of a positive wave versus all like the kind of the negative, the bad news. You're actually seeing a lot of good.
Yes.
And I think it's so revealing and human. Walking through this kind of a process, it's so revealing of human nature.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, when we're faced with so much, even if it's just projected misfortune, it's misfortune. And when we're facing that, you get to the point where it's like, we can make a big deal out of people stocking up on toilet paper and all that. I think that's on the sillier side of things. I think people are generally going and genuinely going, hey, Like let's link together and get through this together. At least here, I mean, we're speaking from an American context here in our local communities. But the cause and effect thing is interesting as well, because it's one of those things, in my view, it's just one of those things that happens. And I think about, when I was thinking about it, I think about Garden of Eden. And I think about, it was the ultimate decision was placed in mankind's hands, right? There was a tempter there, but ultimately we did have a choice.
Yep.
And that choice brought on something. And then from that point, you have these things, these sicknesses, these misfortunes that come into play. Like you said, I don't have the answer if so is a God that sends it and all that. I don't know. I just know that it exists and it's in our world now.
That's good.
And so,
And remember, that was Job's question to God. Basically, it was, if you'll help me have an exhaustive understanding of why this is happening, I'll be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then God said, really?
Exactly.
Let me give you like 1,000 things you don't have an exhaustive understanding that you readily
cool
accept
with.
every day.
Yep, that's right.
And that's an important thing to remember. But in the end, what did Job say? I know my Redeemer lives, and in the end, he will stand upon the earth. You have to make your mind up. Is this a godless world or is it a God-filled world? If it's
That's
a godless world, you don't have any question to ask about this virus.
Yep.
It's the survival
It's
of
just
the
what it
fittest,
is.
and the weak now are going to be discarded, so the strong will survive.
You're almost thankful for
That's it.
with that view.
If you're a God-filled person, then you're looking for value and meaning, and you're asking the question why and what can be learned out of it.
Yep.
So I've always thought about that Genesis story too, Ben, as something that was, what's God trying to say to us there? Because it seems that first chapter seems to be so much poetry involved. So what is he trying to say to us by? I mean, whether you take it's a literal occurrence or not, there's a message here, and I think you said the message right on. Everybody has the choice. You still have the choice. Nobody's overpowering you. You still get to choose. And sometimes the choices we make, the ramifications are deadly.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that about the coronavirus. I'm saying that there's a lot of things that happen in our world that cause illness that has nothing to do with God.
Yes.
And everything to do with us.
Right. That's right. Yeah, as far as that's a good thought, Ben. The one that stands out to me, particularly with the nature of my job, was number 2 on your list. The robust understanding now when something like this happens of social media. And I also kind of lump in technology to that. And I think to be more specific about what it reveals is that for those people who have made social media and technology their end game, they quickly realize that there's something lacking in that end game. And so as the online pastor here at One and All, what it makes me think about is still not fearing those things, but clearly stating that this is not an end game, because technology and social media is the reality of this situation, why we can still be the church, or broadcast services on the weekend, why we can still have church, because if we didn't have that, it would look very different. And so the scalability of spreading the gospel and engaging people in the conversation of the gospel, I mean, you can even look at this podcast, what we're doing right now, is there's no doubt that we have, as Christians, taken technology and social media for the good. But the question is, what are we using that to drive people towards? And what I think about, particularly with how we had to do our service last weekend, every host preaching and speaking into a camera, an entire worship set done with nobody in a room for people that they didn't, for people still, but people they didn't see. And creating something that can go into people's houses and bring them somewhere. So what I think about when I look at this, the coronavirus and what it's done, it's almost like God has, and at the risk of sounding like I'm saying something about mega churches, I think for all churches, just what God has impressed on my heart in this time is just this image of his fist coming down onto the church and kind of splatting it everywhere back into the neighborhoods saying, hey, I'm tired of you gathering big masses all in one spot at one time on one day during the week. Go out back into your communities, go into your houses, go into the places where people aren't. Go to them. Stop expecting them to come to you. And it was impressed upon me this last weekend, all the churches around the world were the same size this past weekend. 10 to 12 people meeting in a home, right? But we are able to do immeasurably more because of social media and technology, but we need to lead them to the end game of a small community that actually impacts them and just continues to disciple them.
You know, as you're saying that, and in moments in the last few days, God's been bringing something up within my spirit and my heart about obedience. And what you were describing about people in a room talking to a camera, doing, playing these songs in moments of musical worship, and they can't even see people.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you can see it. You don't have to see God move to know that he one, is moving, two, that he can, even if you can't see it, and three, your actions shouldn't be dependent upon the result you're trying to get, but more so in obedience to what you know is true.
Yes.
Function in that and let God do the rest. As you were talking about that.
Yes.
It was a
what we did in there, still honoring to God regardless of if it was recorded and sent out. That's a really interesting perspective. Why are we doing what we're doing? Yeah.
Yeah, that's my head spinning just as I was listening to those two comments, because I remember Ralph Neighbor in the 90s did a complete study on the church in New Zealand and said that the future of the church in New Zealand was in home church. What he did not expect or predict was that the home churches would meet, but they had no teaching. And so if you had all these home churches and no one had the gift of teaching, they became just downright weird.
Yes.
But it's different now.
That's right.
Because I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool to some degree if our entire church was that 10 to 12 people in a home and then everybody on that street just ministered to that street.
Right.
And we came together corporately in a way that through media. So there's good things about social media.
Sure.
But I wonder if this might be the new norm. I wonder if it could be a new normal. If it is the way of the future, think of the money you save.
Yes.
And think of the people. I mean, look, I'm a pastor of a mega church, and I can tell you, your staff, they are worn out. The amount of work they do on a weekend and then getting ready for the weekend, they don't get the 2-day weekend. They are working round the clock, trying to make sure ministries happen, trying to make sure everything happens, everything's taken care of. And I'm just thinking, man, now you go down to 10 or 12 people, you give them the teaching, you give them the encouragement, you give them the worship. It all happens in the home, and then you're responsible for saving, small s, that community in which you're meeting. And then you're doing life together.
Yeah.
You look at your neighbor mowing the grass. Hey, how are you? Well, I'm had a tough, well, let me pray for you.
Yeah.
Hey,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it just spread out exponentially like that, like the seed that continues to grow?
That's right.
You wonder sometimes.
Yeah.
I think it has to coexist with, because you think about it's about the interaction with the neighbors and being present for your local community. Because if you meet if you meet in isolation, basically, and you get the messaging, you're depending on people's self-discipline, and everyone's on different levels.
You better believe
and
it.
They're going to tune, right? They're going to tune on. They're going to switch over to YouTube, or they're going to, do something else. So there's an accountability side of the church that is valued in the gathering. And, maybe you do consider the 10 to 12 a gathering in a home, but I don't think one can exist without the other.
Yes,
how about that?
That's good. And you'd liken that to I think of instantly, and this is three guys that play sports and enjoy watching sports. I think of sports where it's like the in-game experience of going to the Staples Center and watching the Lakers, which I have not done yet since living in LA, but I'm waiting for Ben to give me a ticket.
Sorry, the season's postponed.
Yeah, that's right. But there's a live event that is catering to a particular audience, not competing with the home viewing experience. And both are good experiences, but both each, have their own pros and cons, but they're not competing with each other. They're working in tandem. And I don't know what the answer is for the church, but it seems like the church gathering tries to answer both. Hey, this is why you shouldn't watch at home because it is actually better live, instead of saying, how can we do both? The encouraging gathering of meeting together physically in a large group, but also saying church can happen in your home with 10 to 12 people, ministering to that particular geographical area. But I don't know what that looks like. But I think of live sports when you're talking about that, because they coexist. They don't compete with each other. They both fuel each other, actually, because people buy tickets partially because they can see it on TV, and they watch it on TV because they can't be there in person.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that looks like with the church.
Yeah, the time will tell there.
That's right.
You always want to encourage your people to want to be around other people.
Yes.
And again, the more people who do come together, the more gifts that are present for the body. That's the problem when you get too small. Not every gift is going to be represented.
Yes.
And you risk the gifts that are missing, not balancing things well.
Which is interesting about what you're saying. It's shifting the idea of a very well-resourced church like ourselves being able to stay an organization, but also resource house churches or smaller churches. I shouldn't just pin it into houses, but and I think that is some of the heartbeat of what we want to be as we pursue that vision of seeing a Christ follower in every home.
Yeah, the pendulum always swings too far. I think Ben is right. As long as you don't lose sight and go all the way over to the other side now, you'll be all right. Stay in the middle somewhere and learn what you can from this experience. Adapt, learn, and add. It's more of, okay, let's be this as well. But if you try to go one area all the way, usually you get in trouble.
Do you think that middle ground has been found?
I think we're getting closer to it all the time, and I think while social media is a detriment in some ways, it's also an incredible asset. But it's like everything, isn't it?
That's right.
Everything's. What I'm curious, Ben, you in the last 2 weeks, have you met with any large groups? I mean, you've got a group of friends that you meet with. Have you continued to meet and have coffee and conversation? What have you done?
Are you trying to guilt trip me here on air?
No, I'm just curious. I'm curious.
So I actually haven't. It's within the last 4 to 5 days that my wife and I have. We're just no.
What's your typical? If we weren't in the middle of this, what would your typical week be like?
I'd be out at the club, middle of the day on a Tuesday. No.
Me too. Golf club, right?
Yeah, golf club. Yeah.
No, you got kicked out of that one.
I'm terrible at golf.
What do you do? Do you hang out with?
I'm actually. It depends on the day, but a good chunk of my days, I do a lot of work from home.
Yeah.
So another good chunk is going out meeting with people. So that's at coffee shops. That's here on campus. It's being involved in services. So that's, hundreds and depending on where you're at, but here.
Do you have a group of friends that you hang out with? I'm just curious. Did you hang out with regularly? 4 or 5 guys? Yeah. Good. And where do you go? Buffalo Wild Wings?
Oh man, a mix between
shops?
Congregation here in Azusa. It's got great food and drinks there.
That is a good place.
Yeah, it's really very good.
Is that like the one in Pasadena?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Same place. Yeah. I find for some reason I find the food better in this Azusa one.
I've not been to that.
I don't know
one.
that.
We're there quite frequently.
Yeah.
It's
I've been told to go
It's
there,
on Azusa.
Okay.
Right before if you're going north on Azusa, it's right before you hit Foothill or
Baseline?
Basically Route 66. South of the Target there.
Little commercial there for
that's right. Hey,
so
always looking for
sponsors. Another
sponsors.
sponsor. So go out there. There's tons of spots in Pasadena I like to hang at. There's this place called Magnolia House. That's really cool.
We live in a good place, don't we?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Lots of things at the.
So as far as the last 2 weeks, I don't think I've been in an overly large.
Yeah, I haven't played golf which is really strange for me. It's a weekly thing, but I'm not sure why. I think for me, it's more of, I feel I should be here. I feel I should be here because in case I'm needed or if a leadership decision is required.
Yeah, there's a lot of decisions.
So I think my mind wouldn't be on it. And I think we're all a little bit like that right now. And hopefully that we'll go back to some kind of normality.
Yeah.
It's crazy walking around. And just like, it's the ultimate elephant in the room that's not being addressed about how far you're standing from each other and how you're just like, hey,
Yes.
nothing's different between us, but don't touch me.
Yes.
You know? Yeah, I've had some.
Well, like I said, I've got two 80-year-olds in the house, so
Yeah.
for me, it's a challenge.
That's right.
I'm very careful what I do and make sure sanitize before
Yes.
I
Yeah.
come home. And
Yeah.
How would you get, for someone who you've been open about past battles with anxiety, how would you, I don't know if you have any advice for this or maybe ideas, people who perhaps struggle with anxiety during this time.
yeah, this would be a tough season for them.
You know, I was watching John Mayer's Current Mood. He does this thing on Instagram occasionally where he does like a kind of a talk show thing. And he basically just sets the phone up and he just kind of rambles and talks about nothing. And he was talking about anxiety and how that he's like, there's abstract anxiety where he's like, it's the kind of anxiety that I get when I'll walk up to a mic performing at a show and then I'll just think, what if this microphone turns into a beehive and like all the bees fly up my nose? And he's like, I almost had a panic attack on stage one time because he couldn't stop thinking about
the cycle.
like, what if this thing happened? And then he said, there's more like reactive anxiety where if a plane's going down, you're a little tense because the plane's going down, right? And everyone is on somewhat of a level. So I think there's a balance between people that may feel anxious in this scenario, just thinking about either their health or economic well-being and things like. There's a ton of
a lot of scenarios to play out and to play down the road. A lot you can play the what if game pretty easy with.
I don't know if you have any
like this.
thoughts towards that.
Yeah.
Oh, I
dealing with that, or
I would have been that exact person 10 years ago.
wow,
Yeah.
Now the opposite is true, and I think if you go through anxiety and you can come out on the other side so much stronger because see, the only way you can really defeat anxiety is by something that's stronger than the anxiety.
That's right.
And let me tell you something. It is strong. I'm not belittling it at all. It is the strongest, most ferocious enemy I ever had to face in my life. But once you realize that you have the capacity to stop to stop the brain in the spin, you have to learn. It's an art and a science. Once you learn to do that, you realize how much power the mind has. You know, for the first time in my life, I actually started. Okay, but let me be careful here. I started to respect Joyce Meyer's The Battlefield of the Mind.
Oh,
I read it
yeah.
when I was younger. I thought, but no, I thought, wait a minute now. Some of this starts to make sense to me.
Yes.
Because everything's a battlefield of the mind. So much so, let me tell you the difference now. If I was on a plane, remember how before I had anxiety disorder, terrified of flying. Absolutely
Wow.
terrified. You ask my wife, if we got any kind of commotion or any kind of turbulence, I'm like this.
White knuckle, yeah.
The opposite happens now. So if the plane was going down now, I would be the one that's level-headed and thinking, okay, what can we do here?
Right.
Everybody else is panicking around
Sure.
me. What can I do? Remain level-headed. What can we do? And so in times like these, people who have a tendency toward anxiety disorder, their mind will go out of control numerous times a day. And that's why if you can learn to stop it when you're not in a pandemic, then when the pandemic comes, you can. And the only way to stop that is through prayer and reassurance of your mind that you're not in control. God is, and no matter how many scenarios you come up with, you won't get the right one.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so that way, that's what you give up. You kind of submit. Oh, man,
Yeah.
I can't control this. No matter what I do and how much I think
Yeah.
about it, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
It's interesting what that threshold is for
different people.
Yeah, because I think about, there's so many references you can pull about the attention towards the mind and the benefit of a healthy mind and even being transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's so many mind-oriented scriptures basically going like, hey, this is a powerful thing. And like that renewing is what I take from what you're saying, that like kind of, okay, retraining, kind of going, how can you?
Yes.
I wonder what that is. I've never actually personally dealt with it. So it's just something that is very
Nor have I, but my
obscure me.
wife has. And I'm curious, is that just what you're saying to overcome that in the positive self-talk? And it's more than positive self-talk because it's praying and
biofeedback.
it's actually, what are
It's a
some of
lot.
those rhythms?
Yeah, it's a mixture of things, and you learn it. It does become an art. The first thing is biofeedback. Because
Okay.
what's happening when your mind is spinning, your heart is racing.
Yeah. Okay.
You take 4 deep breaths. No matter who you are, if you take 4 deep breaths back to back to back to back, your heart rate will slow.
Wow.
And what you do is you put your fingers here by your throat where your pulse is, and you will.
Yeah.
And what happens is it sends a message to the brain. I'm not panicking anymore.
Yeah.
So the brain shuts. Now it'll start again, but you've got a little window of time to self-talk. And that's when you say, wait a minute, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm fine. I'm not dying. Whatever happened. Now, if you're going down in a plane, that's another kind
That
of
is
anxiety.
different. Yeah, that's
Sure.
pretty extreme.
But
Yeah.
if your mind is thinking about what possibilities might happen, you get the scriptures in there, and while your mind is free, before it goes back up, you get a minute. But then what happens is you cut it off, and it can't start again. And so people who suffer from anxiety disorder have these basically in the middle of the night, or when they've been busy for a long time, and then they sit down
Yep.
to stop. And then
Gotcha.
that, boom, and that's when because it hits you out of nowhere. And but you so the biofeedback, the scripture, and then you have to reset your mind every morning. That's why you have to
That's
get a
good.
non-negotiable, and you sit down just for a moment. You don't have to be there for half an hour.
Yep.
Take some deep breaths. Read one scripture. I like to go to my favorite website and read. A thing, something that we talked about this last time,
Yes.
something that makes me really think about reality and God and what the world is like, and then it just gives me a peace. But on this note,
Yes.
and I'm so glad I thought of this because I thought, man, when we talk today, I want to make sure and bring this out. Here's when the rubber hits the road.
Okay.
Okay, when you go through a pandemic, you will not be sustained by shallow truths
That's right.
or by platitudes. So this is when you know what you've been learning over the course of your life. If you've sat under teaching that has helped you go down into the deep places of life and meaning, and you still, you don't have somebody just quoting scriptures to you left and right without any explanation, but you're really going down into life and worldview and the cross, and you get those deep inside you. When these times come, you'll be the one at peace.
That's right.
But if you're superficial and church to use a social function and you kind of go to get it done with, and as soon as the last song's out, you're out. If that's you, I guarantee you're not going to respond any differently than anybody who's not a Christian.
Yes.
Because it hasn't made its way down deep into the soul. And that's why we churches have to really ask when we do come together corporately, what are we actually achieving?
That's right.
And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody other than myself.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ask the question in this time, am I being a good leader? Am I giving people something that will sustain them
Wow.
in their deepest hours? And if I'm not, see, those are, those things, superficial things have a way of breaking apart when real trouble comes.
That's right.
But things of great depth, it doesn't matter really what happens around them. They have a way of being very not only stable but fertile. They seem to just spread throughout other people as well. Say that's what my life should look like. Corrie ten Boom in the concentration camps. There's no pit so deep that his love is not deeper still, and yet she's in the middle of horrific
That's
suffering.
right.
How do you do that? Well, you got an anchor that
roots.
goes pretty deep.
That's right. That's really good.
Wow. I think the closest I got to, experiencing like anxiety was I was just recently on a flight from Paris. This was beginning of February.
You're a pretty cool dude, Ben.
He's
you know that?
He's a world traveler. man.
I was I'm more so chuckling about like
It's been
the
actually
virus.
years. It's a hologram.
Yeah, I don't know.
What happened, man?
So flying into Paris, quite a windy city. So we're coming, and the jet's fairly small because it was a domestic plane.
Oh, you're puddle hopping.
Yeah. So was hopping around Europe, and we're coming down to the runway, and it's just the plane is just jerking like everywhere. We're probably about a couple of 100 feet from landing.
Oh, man.
So probably 30 seconds maybe from touching. But it's interesting when you're in the plane. One of the things I hate the most is, and I'm not like afraid of flying. I was just in this one instance. This is right after I heard about Kobe Bryant and all that. That was a helicopter, but still this idea of like tragedy from the air just hit me, and I went, oh my gosh. But when you're looking forward in the plane and you see the window and then you also see the cabin, that's the worst view. Look at one or the other, because you're going to see exactly how the plane is moving, left or right, up and down.
Sorry, I don't mean
you're going to see all this happening. And so we're coming down, and I felt like I was in a toy just getting tossed about. We're near landing, and then all of a sudden he guns it, and then we lift back up into the air. We were 20, 30 feet from touching, and he's basically just like, nah.
Called it. Nope.
Yep. He's like, because he was wrestling to get the
You know
thing
what? I'm
steady.
really glad to hear that, because I've always wondered, like, how audacious are the pilots? Like, will they just own it and pull out, or are they just going to like, oh, we're committed. I'm going to do this as good as I can.
I really respected this
That
guy.
just
He was
stay
just
in
like,
the
yeah.
air.
And so, of course, you hear this big gasp in the plane. Everyone's like, oh, they're worried. And I was just like, oh, gosh.
Here we go again.
Yeah.
Was it better the second time?
Well, so he takes a minute to jump on the intercom. I was like, all right, dude, is anybody going to say anything?
Right.
Or
Just
was
going to
that
not
just
address
me?
it.
He's just like, so he jumps on and he says, hey, weather conditions are a little rough at the moment. We're just requesting for a different airstrip to come in from a different direction.
Good answer.
And so he's like, we're going to hang out and circle around here for a few minutes until they open it up. And I was just like, oh, that's nice. So then we come back down the second time, and it's from the different direction, friendlier to where the wind was moving that day. And it was still rough, but we got down. But those last few seconds before the wheels touch,
Man.
that was like that very practical, like anxiety of just like, oh gosh. And then once we touched down, that was the end of that, but that was stressful.
I've heard that 4 deep breaths followed by reminding yourself you're not going to die.
You know,
It works pretty good.
I do the deep breath thing whenever I get my pulse taken at the doctor's.
I'm going to have to do that.
Because
this is such good.
it's a mental thing. I start thinking about, oh no, they're reading how fast my heart rate
Yes.
is. And then my heart rate goes,
Of course. That's
it's like
right.
the lie detector test.
Yes.
Right? You're not, you know it's happening, so you just,
Yes.
so I go, and I try and, it's the breath out that really starts to slow it. And then when they're still taking a reading, I was like, dang, they're not on the last bit. It's still releasing from the arm a little bit.
Yes.
I was like, now I got to do another one. But if I inhale now, it'll speed up real quick before I slow it down again. But yeah, I learned that trick just to try and keep my numbers down.
Worst flight I ever had was on Air France. We were struck by lightning.
What?
But they're made to repel, but it was loud and right by my window and
What?
scared me to death. Yeah.
Was it bright for a minute? Like what in the...
Oh no, it popped. It's crack pop, but they're made to reflect. They're made to get struck by lightning. But it's
crazy.
still, it took out the entertainment system though. So crack, pop, dark, light, auxiliary light, and then back to normal. And then the pilot came on and said, "Yeah, we got hit by lightning. That happens from time to time." It's France is a very volatile place to fly, no doubt.
The weather's pretty
Worst
pretty
flights.
nuts.
I don't know what it is above France. It's just some. But I thought about our boys jumping out of planes above France during the war.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some of those guys were sick before they even got off the plane. It's just very bumpy, wind direction swirling. It's kind of like a Cook Strait between the North and South Islands of New Zealand. That's the roughest waters in the world.
Really?
The roughest
Wow.
air in the world is, some of the roughest is over France.
Fascinating.
It's scary. Yeah.
I think time will make me feel better about it, because I don't normally have trouble flying. Even if it is like turbulent, it just doesn't bother me. I was just thinking, oh no, too much fog. And that was it for Kobe's pilot, and of course everyone else.
The best way to deal with that is Coldplay. Yeah. If you put Coldplay on, see the thing is, if you put Coldplay in your ear while you're landing, you don't hear all the noise of the plane making, and it makes you feel like you're in a rocking chair listening to good music.
Wow.
I'm serious, that's another trick I learned.
Wow.
The only time I'm ever really scared of flying is when we're descending, or I was.
Sure.
So what I do is on descent, when he says, "Hey, we're going to start our descent," I'll put Coldplay on. Usually one of the first ones, and I'll just lean back like this, and then as I'm moving around, it's kind of going to the beat, and I'm serious because it's all about what your brain is fearing.
Yep.
Sure.
And if I take the headphones off, then I can hear every little nook and cranny, every little bending of the plane, and it makes me a little nervous, not anxious, but nervous. So I thought, why do that? Just put on some good music, man, and go to sleep. So I'm usually asleep by the time we hit the tarmac.
I didn't know if you were serious or not. You're for our listeners.
Yeah.
Jeff Fine's dead
absolutely.
serious.
Coldplay.
And relax in the seat.
Ghost stories are great for descent. In air, speed of sound, which was X and Y, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
I
then
believe so.
then takeoff, Rush.
Rush.
Rush. Anything by Rush is because you're like, man, this is cool.
Man, we
got
gotta get a Jeff Fine's travel playlist.
I've got a playlist. It's on my
Spotify.
phone, and it's
We gotta get.
We talked about Coldplay last time too.
This is a reoccurring deal.
Yeah, I don't know why I love music, and I love all music except country. But I just don't like.
Well, you
country
said
music.
you like music,
Yeah,
right?
I do. Exactly. I like music.
I'm just kidding.
Not four chords over
we don't
and over
care
again.
about country sponsors at all.
Hey, I
That's
think
not
country writers are some of the greatest.
Lyrics wise, and I just don't like the music that goes with it.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy Coldplay, and I don't know. I never get old. Never gets tired.
That's good.
If you have, to close this off, if you have any, well, two things actually. Any general word of encouragement, people that might listen to this a bit later or even catch a little snippet of a video we're doing from today's discussion, what would that little bit of advice be? And the second one, what's next for One and All? At least in the green, it could be the grand future, or at least just in the next few weeks.
I think my word of encouragement would be is that everything that I've learned from trusted sources, this will be over. This will pass.
Good.
I think we're making some great decisions right now.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is it shows me that we care about our old people.
Yeah.
We are a society that cares about the elderly because they are the most susceptible. And I like to see our country inconveniencing all of us for the sake of the elderly.
Yeah,
that's something that generations past have not done. And but stay put, isolate. For their protection, not your own, but for the protection of those who are more susceptible. This will pass. We're going to be fine. The second thing is that I think there's so much good that's going to come out of this.
Yes.
There's so much good. You say, well, how can it be good? Some people died. Yes, I know that, and I am sad about that. And just as I'm sad that 120,000 people died last year of influenza.
Yeah.
I am sad when anybody suffers and dies, but I do believe in a God who's able to take what is meant for evil and turn it and use it for good. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so many good things that there's so many things we've taken for granted that suddenly we're going to value. How long that will last, I don't know.
Yep.
But we will value it. One and All Church, this has been an eye-opening experience for us, Ben, because we have people, just again today, I guess I made a statement in one of our radio programs down under where that we would like to see one and all churches established throughout the South Pacific. And so Radio Rhema is getting flooded with emails saying, hey, I heard Pastor Jeff talk about that we're going to have a One and All church down here. Well, I've decided I need to go back to church. I haven't been for a long time. This is what pandemics do. Wow. Can you tell me where one of the One and All churches are? Yeah. I thought, oh boy. So I spoke to Rhema today and I said, hey, just hold on tight here. We're not quite there. Send out an email or send me their email and I'll respond to them that it's coming. Yeah. But you know what's amazing is what happened on the weekend showed me what we can package. Mm-hmm. And if we'll start thinking in different terms, because what's our heart? Our heart is not money.
No.
Our heart is not One and All branding. Our heart is people far from God coming near. And I'm telling you, that's what I like about our church. We're not in this for money making. We're not, hey man, how can we franchise and make money? Yeah. And when your heart is right, I think God opens all kinds of doors.
Amen.
So I'm curious to see what doors He'll open for you and for Aaron and for our church as we get the gospel out to as many people as can hear it. It is the good news, and it is the only thing that will sustain you, and it's the only kingdom that no disease can ever touch. And
yeah, that's good.
That's
Amen.
it.
That's a perfect way to end.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for the coffee too. Fantastic coffee today.
Oh,
yeah. So,
thank you.
So this,
got to review
Cactus Coffee.
This is very good, Ben.
So this is in
Have you or
Laverne.
have you not been to Cactus?
No, I have not, and I got to tell you, I'm impressed. I'm impressed because of the quality of their oat milk and the richness of their coffee without being bitter. So where is Cactus Coffee?
Cactus is on D Street
Yes.
Oh,
in Laverne,
yeah.
just north of the universe. Well, it's kind of just right there where the university is.
Did you said universe,
I thought he said
which is
north
kind of
of
funny.
universe for a moment. That was hilarious.
That's a special.
Just north
we didn't
of
hear
universe.
the university.
So I was telling
we just heard universe.
It's a hologram.
I was telling Aaron earlier that often, like, my brain goes faster than my mouth, and I'll just stop sentences and I'll dump it and start a new thought. I even did it just in this sentence. I started
Universe,
to talk about
just
something
stopped
and
it.
then I curved.
I'm so glad he said that because when I first met Ben, he frustrated me until I No, seriously.
good, yeah.
I'm seriously.
Let's hang
And
here
then I
for a
realized,
second.
I'm the opposite of Ben. My mouth goes before my brain. His brain runs heavy and his mouth can't catch up. And so now that I understand him, I just sit back, wait, it'll come. And it always does, doesn't it? It always.
Sometimes you got to wait a fair bit of time or remind him. But
Joey
it comes.
Versace's like that. Yeah,
We haven't had Joey on yet, but that is one voice we're very excited to have on.
Oh boy, I can't wait till you have Joey.
That's right.
He never met a question he didn't like.
That's right. So you would rate this do we do a rating system, Ben, or is it just random? I mean, that's high praise. I mean,
Just
as far as I'm
experience.
concerned,
How
for
was your
Cactus, this is a 10. When a Jeff Vines is this open about your coffee.
I got to tell you, I'm so glad that you brought me this coffee because I've gone everywhere. I've gone to, I shouldn't say names, but I've gone to another place in Laverne. I've gone to a couple of places in Azusa, and everybody says, oh, you're going to like it. I've gone to a place in Chino, not bad in Chino, if you know where I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This is good to know.
Number one, Ben.
Oh, wow.
This is
That is a question I had for you.
I think it's because this is probably South American blend, is it?
I don't know,
don't-
to be honest.
I don't know what the word is.
But it's so good that I'm going to stop there on the way home
Yeah.
to try one of my favorite drinks when it's really hot and see how they do.
Yeah, and I would recommend doing it soon because I think the lady in there was talking about she doesn't know how long they're going to be able to.
That's right, because
so-
nobody can go in and sit down right
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
Thank you, Ben, for the way to my heart is
Yeah.
through a good coffee, and
Through
you
a
have
cup of
delivered.
bean.
You have delivered.
That's what it is.
course.
Good bean. And how was your latte, Ben?
Tremendous. Great flavor. You taste the espresso. I'm going to say this with any good coffee. You taste the espresso, and the milk just serves as a smoother, like a smoothener, and it just a little bit of sweetness.
This is a coffee connoisseur.
That's right. Yeah, that's
But
good.
I taste all the stuff going on.
And that's important because I've heard you talk about certain lattes where it just feels like you're drinking some warm milk. You don't really get that
Yeah.
the bean to it.
Exactly.
And so
it's
that's
not bitter,
good.
but it's just it kind of sometimes it tastes like cheese.
That's right.
like-
It's a weak. It's like a weak Coke. You know, when there's no
Yeah.
fizz or like
Oh, yeah.
man. And
The worst.
it's hard to. You have to know what you're doing. Speed of the water, the coffee through the machine, everything.
Yeah.
You got to know what you're doing.
Yes.
If you don't know what you're doing, you can have the best product.
A couple of the employees there are New Zealand and Australian, so
There you go.
You can taste it. You
Yeah.
can taste it.
I'm telling you, man, they know what they're doing.
And the cold brew actually so much. Cactus is going to get the trifecta today because I was just drinking this and I just don't remember it being this good. I remembered it being good, but not this good. Yeah, their cold brew is fantastic. It's not too. I'm not a big fan of when it tastes like herbally or when it's bitter, when it tastes more like iced coffee instead of like they actually brewed it cold brew. But and it's not weak either in regards to water. It's not over water saturated. Just a great cup of coffee all the way around. I feel like Cactus should be the staple, regardless of if we get a sponsorship.
we're going to try and get their
from them or not.
sponsorship. This is your one and only mention,
Yes.
Cactus.
Cactus.
All right, cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you, Ben.
Until next time.
God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for that episode of the One and All podcast. Got a great insight into Jeff Vines' perspective on the coronavirus and kind of national tragedies or things that get people excited. I don't know what that word is, just in general. Just that it was interesting for me to hear that there wasn't a ton of difference between this and stuff that's happened in the past.
And I'm encouraged from his headspace.
Yeah.
I think it's a headspace that I try to stay in frequently, of just being kind of sensible, deeply rooted. It's obviously easier said than done, and I know different people have kind of different levels of depth and focus and like ability to do that. But really encouraging what he brought. So
we hope you enjoyed that listen. And until next time, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Ben.
Thanks for listening.